Hi, philosophers. If you had a choice to take the blue pill and remain ignorant of the world as it really is, or take the red pill and come to know the truth, however uncomfortable, what would you choose? So that is the major plot point to the movie The Matrix, which came out over 20 years now, so dating myself, back in 1999. Right, the next one's coming out next year, so they revived the film franchise. If you're familiar with it, great. If you've never watched it, I don't know how, but please go watch it. It's on Netflix right now. I have several clips of it because it connects so well to metaphysics, and there's so many different metaphysical questions and dilemmas and things that come up in the film The Matrix. So I hope you get a chance to watch it or re-watch it after reading chapter 2 and thinking about some of the questions that we're talking about in this class. So I want to connect it to, first and foremost, Plato's allegory of the cave. So that's one of the sort of hallmarks of metaphysics introduction textbooks for a reason. So Plato had this allegory that is a story that he used to illustrate his ideas about metaphysics. So in the allegory of the cave, there is a person who is tied up, right, in a cave for their entire life. Everybody who's next to him is tied up exactly all the way up against a wall. They cannot see one another. All they can see because of the candles behind them are the shadows on the wall. And so they think that shadows, right, as opposed to real flesh and blood or sort of more three-dimensional things, that shadows are reality. And the person escapes and goes out of the cave, sees the sun for the first time, is blinded by that sun and blinded by this new reality, but comes to know, right, that what they thought was reality all along was just an illusion. And so Plato uses this to talk about and challenge our ideas that what we see or what we perceive as reality is not necessarily the world as it really is. So that's what we're talking about in metaphysics by saying, what is really real? So the question, right, to circle back is, if you could know reality as it really is, if you could dig into that, would you want to know, right? Would you take that red pill, or would you want to remain ignorant? So that's one of the discussion question options for metaphysics, and there's several others as well that are out there. I also have a question where you just list the things that are real, right? So are the things that are really real to you, right? Are they all physical, or some of them non-physical? Are the physical things more real than the non-physical, or are they just different in some way? Getting into chapter 4 for next week, you have 2 other options. So you only need to pick 1 out of the 4 discussion options for your post and your reply to a classmate, but you are welcome to respond to more than that and to move around between the different discussions. So in chapter 4, I have 2 stories. Because I think stories are a great way to do philosophy. So I hope that you dig into those stories. They're short, right? They're both videos. One is a children's book, and the other is by Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian. It's a shorter kind of sci-fi story, and is really good about getting at kind of Eastern ways of thinking about ultimate reality. And then there's the question of the problem of evil. So go to the discussion board, check those out, and then hopefully you'll find one that interests you, and you can start kind of mining either chapter 2 or chapter 4 for your quote there. Also, I want you to check out the Digging Deeper. That's the extra credit. And there's several different options there that I think would be really fun to start kind of padding your grade, but also just for you to literally dig deeper, right? To not just skim the surface of this class, but to kind of look more at kind of doing your own reflections as well. Okay, so there's a Matrix bingo if you want to watch the full movie, or even just rewatch the clips and fill out a bingo sheet. So I have an example here, right, that I've done in classes before. So you'd only need to pick 5, right? Or no, 4, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, and kind of say what the connection to the film is, to the particular term. So it's a great way to get in the textbook with some of those key terms you might be using in the argumentative essay, but using a film to kind of draw out what that concept might mean. And there's a Rick and Morty. For those of you who are fans of Rick and Morty, you can make connections to metaphysics and do reflection there. And then there's a bunch of other stuff as well, other videos from Closer to Truth that might be really interesting to you. Okay, so those are the discussion options, right? So the big one is red pill or blue pill, but that's not the only one. So if you're not a sci-fi person, I will not hold it against you. You do not have to answer that question, but if you find it intriguing, I hope you will answer that question. Okay, I want to do just some basics, and you can go to the PowerPoint and obviously to chapter 2 to go more in depth on metaphysics and on all of the different traditions that are out there. But I want to go into just 3. They're also covered in the PowerPoint as they connect to the matrix. But I do a little thing in class, typically that's hands-on, which obviously we wouldn't have been able to do anyway this semester. But for those of you who are more kind of hands-on thinkers, maybe this will be helpful for you. So I'll go over materialism, just the very, very basics, Plato, right, and then Buddhism. But if none of those 3 are interesting to you, remember that there's multiple traditions in all of the chapters. So I hope you, especially after chapter 1, you kind of got an overview of the different traditions that Mitchell is drawing from. I hope you'll kind of gravitate towards whatever that tradition is. So maybe it's an Eastern tradition like Taoism, or maybe it's an African tradition, either from Ghana, or perhaps it's one of the North American traditions, right? The Mayan traditions, or just peoples of the Americas traditions that she represents. So don't feel as if, right, you have to write about or confined to just the ones that I mentioned. So I'm just going to use 3 with my little example here to get us to think about this question about what is real and what are the distinctions between some of these different approaches. And then I'll go on to the argumentative essay, right, which is not due this week. It'll be due at the end of next week, but you need to start thinking about it so that you can start looking through either chapter 2 or chapter 4, right? It won't cover both. You're going to pick, right, just one question and then 2 thinkers, theories, or traditions. So a thinker would be somebody like Plato, a theory would be something like materialism, or a tradition would be something like Buddhism. You don't just have to use thinkers, you can use theories and traditions as well. But as you're reading through the chapters, it's good for you to say, I understand this person, right? I might want to have them as my strongest thinker. And then as you go along, who might disagree? Who's going to be a good objector, right, for that strong thinker? So your argumentative essays are not by any means meant to cover all of the chapters, certainly not all 2 chapters for each section, right, of the course. It's really you kind of honing down into what's one person you really, or one theory even, that you really, really understand and kind of can get behind, and then who's a good objector to that person, okay? So let me just kind of do my funny little hands-on, right, activity that I like to do in class. So typically I hand out Play-Doh to everybody in class, and we start thinking about this question of, you know, what is really real? So we typically think about the things that are real are the things that are right in front of us. I can touch it, I can see it, right, I can smell it. And then we say, well, you know, is somebody's soul, right? If you believe in a soul, well, I can't really touch that. That seems to be their essence, right? So maybe there's things that are real that aren't physical, right? And so that's where Plato's kind of trying to push us. He believed in what he called the forms, another way to think of it as something's essence, so a person's essence, like a soul, right? Or the essence that makes, right, a cup, a table, right? There's tableness. So when you get into that part of the chapter, you're going to be a little annoyed probably with the homework. They're going to talk a lot about tableness, but that there is an essence of what makes a table, right? And for Plato, right, in contrast to his student Aristotle, he thought the world of ideas, the world of forms, the world of essences, right, the non-material, was separate and it didn't need the material, okay? So for him, the material world was just a bad copy, right? So just a bad copy, right? A bad manifestation, always less than manifestation, right, of the essence of something. Okay, for Aristotle, you couldn't separate out the two. The essence was always a part of the material. They're two things, but they needed each other. The essence could never be separate from the material. Okay, for materialists, as their name right suggests, there is no essence out there, right? It's just matter all the way down, right? Particles on top of particles, atoms, right? All of that stuff, it's just matter. That's it. That's all reality is. Okay, so that's another approach that you can take to say, no, there is no essence to anything. It's all matter. And then you can take the kind of Buddhist approach, right? So getting outside of, right, a more Western approach where whether or not there's an essence or whether it's all matter, there's still this idea that things are separate, right? So the table is separate from me. I am separate, right, from my dog who's sleeping down here. Right? We are separate entities, right? Whether or not we have an essence or not is a different argument, but that we are separate. For Buddhists, the ultimate illusion is the separateness, right? And the reality is that we are one. So when I go and I'm playing with my Play-Doh, right, we can think through, let's think through Play-Doh, right, with our Play-Doh first, right? And I've made like 3 little things. So I've made a little person, right? I've made what's kind of, it looks like a turtle, maybe it's an insect, right, thing, and then a flower, right? So 3 kind of distinct things, right? Not well done Play-Doh by any means, but we're going to work with it. And for Play-Doh, right, it was always imperfect, right, replicas of the essence anyway. So for Play-Doh, right, think of, right, so this as being matter, right, as being an imperfect, right, manifestation of something's essence, right? So for him, the essence exists. It's separate from this matter. It gives this matter, right, its form and all of that other good stuff, right? But this doesn't need to exist. The material doesn't need to exist, and it's imperfect, right? It's the illusion, right? Same with my little friend here, insect or turtle, and with my flower, okay? For the materialist, there's no, like I always point out here, as if it's a place, right? The world of forms is not a place. It's the non-material, but it helps, right? It's for me to think of it that way. So for the materialist, there is no world of forms out there, right? In the ether. This is all it is, right? It's just matter. They're all separate, right? The material all the way down, that's all there is, okay? When you get to Buddhism, what do you think I should do? Right? How do you best represent that? It's not that there's an out there world of essences, as in Plato. It's not that this is all there is necessarily, but it's that this is all there is. Okay? That we are all one. And the illusion was that we were separate to begin with. Right? So that's just a fun little hands-on thing that you could do at home to kind of get yourself to think about the distinctions between somebody like Plato, right? Something like materialism, and then an Eastern philosophy like Buddhism. Okay, so they're approaching that question, what is really real, right? In very different ways. And you can parse that question out in a couple different ways. All right, so I want to get on to the argumentative essay, right? Because this is where, everybody's doing pretty well, and I've given you kind of a lot of, in some ways, softer assignments, because the argumentative essay is the one where people are learning, right? You're actually learning how to write this. And so it's the place that people are going to struggle the most, especially the first couple of times, okay? Which is why you have 4 chances to do it. And I take the top 3 grades of this essay. So you'll find that right under week 4, the rubric. So I suggest downloading it or printing it out and making sure you're going through each piece of it. So I have the actual rubric here, and then I have a sample outline for you. So it's a 5 paragraph essay, right? So you shouldn't need to go beyond that. One thing to stress is in contrast to some of the other sections of the course or other types of courses you're taking, for my course, this is not a compare and contrast essay. You're going to be kind of already naturally doing that work as you kind of gather, right, your 2 different thinkers or theories together, right, to figure out where, where they part ways, but it's not a compare and contrast essay. So a lot of people, where they falter is they don't read the rubric and they give me a compare and contrast essay that they've been used to doing in other types of classes, as opposed to an argumentative essay. So I'm just going to walk you really quick through this because for some people that's helpful to hear it as opposed to just read it. So if you're good with just reading it, you can obviously stop the video at any time. So in the first paragraph in your introduction, first I want you to, right, you can do your kind of intro, kind of pull your reader in one-liner if you want, or you can dive right into defining metaphysics, right? So you can use Mitchell or you can use your own words, but it needs to be some version of metaphysics studies what is real, what is reality, right? So something about the real needs to be in that definition of metaphysics. And then you need to identify the philosophical question you are answering. Okay, so I've given you several examples here. Pick just one, okay, and stick within one chapter. So people also get into trouble when they pull a thinker from chapter 2 and try to combine them with a thinker from chapter 4. Well, they're dealing with different kinds of questions there. Okay, so stick with one question and one chapter, right? So you're going to pick chapter 2 or chapter 4 to really focus on for this essay. So examples would be, is there one reality or are there two? Right? So again, for materialists, no, there's one reality. For Plato, there's two, right? That world of forms and the material reality. Is reality purely material or is there a non-physical reality? Okay, and so that's if you were doing Plato materialist, that's another way to reframe that very first question. Can we have form without matter? That's a very specific question, only if you're answering, right, Aristotle versus his teacher Plato, right? So for Plato, right, that world of forms, right, out in the ether, that can exist without matter. For Aristotle, that form is always within matter, right? That blueprint, right, that essence is always within the matter. It cannot exist without matter, okay? So that would be a very specific kind of question for two very specific thinkers. Is everything one? So that's if you want to do Buddhism versus, right, a more Western approach, right? And you could pick multiple Western approaches. Plato would disagree with that, so would the materialists. And then moving on to chapter 4 for next week, does God or ultimate reality exist, right? So what are those arguments for or against that? And then one of the more specific arguments, why is there evil, both natural and moral, in the world? Okay, so those will be theodicies, and that will be covered next week. So if you're interested in jumping ahead to that and you want to write on that, you can jump ahead to chapter 4. You can even make it a more specific metaphysical question. So I've given you kind of broad ones, and again, you're not limited to these, but you could say something fun like, could artificial intelligence ever be as real as a human being? Right? Or pulling from the Matrix, there's a part where it says, is the spoon real or not? So you could have kind of fun with that and be quirky, or you can stick to the more general ones that I've given you. If you're not sure it's a good metaphysical question, email me and let me know. And finally, in your introduction, make sure you have a thesis statement. So I want to know who is being discussed in this argumentative essay and which one is the stronger of the two. Okay? So again, make sure you're not saying I'm going to discuss Buddhism and Plato. That's not a thesis statement for this essay. It needs to be an argumentative essay, okay, that says, I'm going to argue that Plato has a stronger, right, view than Buddhism, right, on the question of oneness, right, or whatever it is you choose. All right, and then your body and conclusion, and this has gone into more in depth, right, in the outline, so you can really use that to your advantage to kind of map it out. But first paragraph is that strongest thinker, right, out of your two, really outlining their position, any key terms, right, make sure that's there, and then using a deductive argument. So you may have to go back to some of the previous weeks where that handout is. It's also within the textbook, the deductive argument. It's in one of the PowerPoints, what a deductive argument is. Remember, those are those simple at least 3-line arguments, right? And those are the ones that are necessarily, that conclusion necessarily follows. You'll be doing the inductive all along the way pretty naturally. So I really want you to focus on making a deductive argument. So go back, look at some of those examples. We did the really simple versions early on, but now you want to try to apply it. Okay? If you'd like to email me your deductive argument that you're going to try to use, I can help you tweak that as long as you do it early enough. Okay? Then you follow it up with an objection. That's what makes this the argumentative essay. Use that second thinker, and you're not going to go too in depth into their whole viewpoint. You're going to say, where do they come in and object? Right? What's that key point? What's in that deductive argument, or what assumption is within your stronger theory or thinker? What are they objecting to? And then your next paragraph, right? Your paragraph 4 is your main thinker's response to that objection. So it's getting you think about your main position, an objection to it, and then a response back to it. Conclusion is to restate that philosophical position, right, to the question that you asked. And then this is where a lot of people, they don't read the rubric, they miss points. What questions does this essay leave unanswered for another day, right? So this is only 1.5 to 3 pages. You're not gonna be able to somehow unravel all of the mysteries of this question in 3 pages. It's not possible. So keep those, questions that you couldn't answer, you couldn't dig into for your conclusion. Okay, so practice getting your readers to want to read more of what you're writing. Using now at least 2 quotes, right, from Mitchell. And then again, 1.5 to 3 pages. Okay, make sure you're welcome to go to outside sources, but at least one of your citations needs to be from Mitchell. Okay, so you can use Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I have a link to that under philosophical resources or other things as well. But if you're not using Mitchell, you're going to be flagged for plagiarism, and then we'll have to have a discussion. And I don't like doing those. So make sure you're using Mitchell. Make sure you're not doing a compare and contrast, but you're actually doing the argumentative essay that's outlined in the rubric. All right, I will see you guys online. Don't forget you can come to virtual office hours if you want more face-to-face. And I look forward to reading the discussion board and seeing what you guys have to say on there. Bye.